bricks there like Stone Cold with a few beers. Play the game, I end the game, I'm champion, I'm Triple H. Undertaker, I'm your maker, bury the brother like Kane. Ooh, 1-3, hit the tombstone, hit the choke slam on face. Ooh, yeah, like a macho heel, tell like country muscle. If you suffer like tomatoes, I'ma keep a couple models. Ooh, and you may call me HBK. When I'm tuning up the vein, you best be getting in my way. Ooh, yeah, I'm degenerate, I love it, yes, I love it. If you ain't down with that, then I got two words for you, suck it. Too sweet, put your fangs up. Too sweet, pouring up the club. Let's be busy, 23, got me feeling way too sweet.
Welcome everyone to your longest running Australian wrestling podcast, Wrestle Radio Australia. I'm your host, Todd Eastman. It is good to be here with you this week. Bit of a quick intro because I'll be honest with you, I don't have a views from the East this week because I'm not angry at anything. I don't have any axes to grind. I don't have any people that I'm mad at. I don't have any. I'm quite happy at the moment, believe it or not. Our guest this week, I guess it was probably because of the guest I talked to this week. My guest this week is Concrete Davidson. He is one of the standouts in PWA and also New Pro. One of the original podcast guys in Australian wrestling with Pod Clash and then Conco and the Fudge. So, yeah, it was great. We talked all about that. We talked about how fatherhood has maybe changed his perspective on wrestling and all of that sort of gear. And yeah, it was a really fun chat, and I can't wait for you guys to hear it, and that's coming up soon. But if you can, please make sure you subscribe to WRA. It's free. You can do it on iTunes. You can do it on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Stitcher, Spotify, anywhere you get your podcasts from, you can follow us. If you do on Apple Podcasts, please give us a 5-star rating and review. It gets inside more ears. Share the show and spread the word about professional wrestling in Australia like we do every week here on Wrestle Radio Australia. Support the local industry in any way you can, guys. You got wrestlermerch.com. There's a lot of streaming services. I know that PWA is on Fight, and it will be on the new show will be on Fight too on, I think it's I'm not too. There's an ad coming up. It'll tell you when. So there you go. But please support them on Fight. Australian Wrestling Network have the new Pro Wrestling League show that we did up here in Queensland. Please go and check that out. Good content. Riot City Wrestling, you got their YouTube. Just search it out. If there's a local promotion you know, search them out. They're going to have something more than likely online that you can support in some way, shape, or form. But at the moment, being where we're trying to open up, please go and support the shows if you can, if you wish, if you like the promotion. Really helps these guys get back on their feet after the, nearly 2-year lockdown on and off, if you think about it. If you know real way to support the show, but if you'd like, go to redbubble.com, search out Wrestle Radio Australia. We've got our Wrestle Radio Australia shirts. Anything you want with Wrestle Radio Australia, the WRA logo on it is on there. All the proceeds that go from the sale of that merch go to Gotcha for Life and Beyond Blue, because are the two charities that we really do support here at Wrestle Radio Australia. Anyway, that is enough of me blathering on. Yeah, right on with Concrete Davidson right after this here on Wrestle Radio Australia. Back again because I'm an idiot. Apparently, I must have taken too many knocks to the head during my life. Please support us on all your social medias. Wrestle Radio Australia on Facebook, Wrestle Radio AU on Twitter and Instagram, and also I am at Beast Eastman. There we go. There's the socials. Now back to the show.
December 3rd, Max Watts. PWA returns home. Now We Conquer live, December 3rd, live on Fight.
Concrete Davidson, it's good to see you, mate. Thank you for coming on the show.
No, thanks for having me. Thanks for asking me. It's been a while. I think maybe the last one we did might have been when I was there. Actually, not even there. It was in Adelaide. It was maybe one of the ones that I think we were using my equipment too, perhaps. But yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, I was thinking about it the other day. I think you were talking with Josh, and Cree and I like gate crashed it.
Yeah. Yes.
Just sitting in.
Yeah, we kind of found. Was it the Latvian? I think we maybe found a room out the front or something. And that was a good time.
Yeah. So how have you been, mate? Anyway, good.
Great. Yeah. Just having a second son. Maybe he's a month old today. So yeah, it's been full on. So yeah. He just started laughing last night.
Yeah. Oh, that is like right up your alley, though.
Yeah, well, it's funny because it was just I just hear him laughing in his sleep, and you just always think like, what has a newborn got to laugh about? They don't. But he was having a good laugh, and it's funny because like my other son, who's now 16 months old, he's just starting to laugh at stuff that makes sense. Because before he was just laughing because he was mirroring what you do. Yeah. And then we'd laugh even more because it's like, we know you don't get it. But now he's like properly laughing at stuff. And it's, it's pretty funny. So
it's like when kids start talking and they hear you swear and start swearing, then you start laughing. So then they start laughing and start swearing more. So like, I got a reaction.
I know that I'm going to be terrible when they get to that age that like they think that like farts and poo and that's like is funny and that becomes their punchline for everything. I'm still gonna laugh. I'm gonna get into trouble for still laughing at dumb stuff that they are gonna be talking about at that age. So yeah, we'll see.
You were really early on the old podcast train, mate. Did you, when you started doing it, because you started doing it around the same time or just before we started, did you ever think that you would get to the point where there are just a million of these things around and everyone's doing them?
I don't know if I even thought that far ahead. But I remember at the time there was nothing in Australia that was really doing. I think you guys weren't far behind. It was maybe only a matter of months. So I remember putting a lot of effort into like researching and seeing. I think it was Podomatic was the server that I was on. And I don't remember if you guys were on there, but I remember I started on Podomatic and then I noticed a couple of others. I don't think it was you guys. There was a couple of others that popped up on Podomatic and I was like, oh, you're just piggybacking the research I did. But yeah, I remember doing it back and I think I kicked it off in like 2011 or 2012. That was called Wrestling Pod Clash. And it was, I just wanted to do something that I was a big like Hamish and Eddie fan, obviously, and then like the Art of Wrestling as well. And I just remember listening to those Art of Wrestlings and just thinking like, man, it'd be great if we had something like that down here. But then I was like, why don't I just do it? But I didn't want to copy him exactly. So I like the first maybe dozen or so episodes, I tried to have like two people on at once, and that was the sort of different take I had was. People because I think that like the first episode ever was Robbie Eagles and DJ Fusion, and it was like the idea was having a high fly from AWF and a high fly from PWA that never met, and it was like I thought, like this will be great, like they can sort of tell both stories and sort of parallel, but it's like it's funny now because like Robbie's this double champion in New Japan and DJ Fusion retired a few years ago, so yeah, it was just a very different landscape back then, but it was funny because you could see all the different Aussies who were fans of the Art of Wrestling, and when they come on my show, they would try to shoehorn in their story in certain parts. Like I remember Tama Williams, like I would like try to talk him through stuff and like, I'd try to, interview him and he'd be like, yeah, but back to this. And then blah, blah, blah. And I was like, you've got a picture in your mind of what you want it to be because you've listened to those episodes and you think, what would I say to this? So yeah, there was a fair bit of that actually. He's the only one that springs to mind, but yeah, it was a weird, it was a fun little go. So
yeah. You would have got
Listen to
like
a
the
few,
same.
like,
What was that? The old ones.
yeah, well, I went to put them on Patreon or something to see if there was interest, and there wasn't really. But it was funny because I was like, oh wow, I don't think I could have. I don't think I could do it now. I don't think. I think that listening to my old self, I was like, oh, geez, I really had a lot more self-confidence back then with, talking and stuff. Like now I'd probably be too, oh, I can't say this, or I don't want to ask that, or I'd be too finicky in the editing process probably. So I don't know.
That was what I was going to ask, because when I started, I was the same. I was like, oh, I don't want to ask this because I don't want to get anyone offside, especially if they're a friend too. You're like, I don't want to hang a friend out to dry because I know this stuff and it'd be interesting to talk about. I don't necessarily think that they want to talk about it. So it's almost gone the opposite way for you now. Now it's like, maybe I wouldn't ask that, where back in the day you were just, I'm just going to ask.
Yeah, but I think I've always sort of had an awareness in the back of my head of like how wrong it can go for people. Because, you hear these stories about like, oh, so-and-so said this and then that got them into trouble, or that got them cancelled or whatever. So I've always been, pretty good at that stuff. But then like, yeah, listening to some of those old ones, it's like there's a bit of, there's just a few terms that haven't aged well, things that were a bit more in people's vernaculars back then that these days are people are a bit more not sensitive to, but just more, have a greater awareness and understanding of. So I don't know if those shows will ever be put back up. I'd have to really be stuck with something to do to go through each of them with a comb and pull out bits and pieces. So yeah, we'll see.
Well, and then that's the thing, like doing, because you did, how many years did you do it for? You did it for a few, and then you sort of stopped, and then you came back with Fudge.
Fudge, yeah. So it was like 2011, 12, 13, 14. I mean, it just got to the point that I'd be really good at banking them up for a bit, and then they'd catch up, and I'd get them out there. But it was just more or less just a life thing, and I was very particular about. I never wanted to do it like this. I didn't want to do the phone interviews or the online. Like it's commonplace now. Nobody cares. I think that the Stone Cold podcast and Jericho has sort of made it okay to just do an interview over the phone. But I was pretty particular back then, and it would just be really slim pickings in the end of like getting people that you could talk to in one. And also, I was burning through so many people by doing 2 an episode. So then I just changed the format by episode like 20 or something. And I was like, I'm just going to have one an episode or something. And then I think I only ended up getting maybe 34 episodes in total. And maybe the last 14 were single guests. And then it wasn't, I think it was maybe 2017, maybe 2016 that we started Conk on the Fudge. And that was just that just sprang up from like a joke that we had at a Macca's after a show, where we were just doing like these, those weenie in the butt sort of radio morning hosts that he then messaged me later and said, hey, have you actually thought of, would you be interested? And I was like, yeah, I've still got the equipment, so let's give it a go. Because it was always, I don't know, it's a lot of work when it's just you. It's just,
I know.
Yeah. And I was being real, like, I was doing too much. It was stuff like, even doing like the different episode artwork every episode was just so much more effort than I needed to. But then that's a skill that I carried over into my my day-to-day and being a graphic designer and stuff. So it wasn't completely wasted time, I guess. So yeah.
But see, I also think the technology's come along so much now that we can do something like this, and it's almost as good as what you'd see just when you watch TV. If you're doing it on, say, YouTube, like we are here, you can almost make it look like it's a normal TV show anyway. The one thing I noticed through the pandemic, it really made it. I think that everybody just sort of got more fine with. I think that like air travel is back, or it's starting to come back now. I think that they're still going to struggle because so many companies probably realize like
we didn't need to fly anybody anywhere. We could have just
Yeah.
done like this. You know?
Yeah.
So
Salesmen are just realizing, oh shit, I have to stay home now and just Zoom everywhere.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Like I was the same when I first started doing this. It was always I just wanted to do them in person because you generally get a good conversation when you're face to face with someone because they tend to forget there's a microphone and there's a camera and they just talk. But it was like I was in Adelaide and so there was maybe 2 shows a month and you'd be lucky to get whoever we got down for that show would be like, would you like to do a podcast? No. Oh, well, that's that show done for the I'm stuck now, aren't I? But I sort of got forced into doing it. Now when I living up in Brisbane, it's the same sort of deal. So it's sort of like, I've got enough. The technology is the way it is now that I can just message someone, would you like to come on the show? And we do it like this.
Yep.
And now people are that normalized to talking over the computer like this. Maybe the pandemic's helped it, that it just makes it easy.
Yeah. If I was to, I mean, I've had in the back of my mind doing a separate show where it wouldn't maybe be so wrestling centric, but it would be like this. And I think another thing too is that insisting that everything be in person, and you've only got show days most of the time or training or something. I would end up having to, like the David Storm episode that we did with Conquer the Fudge, that was like, I drove all the way to Western Sydney. That was like a 90-minute drive for me just to get to the PWA Academy and sit down with him and do that after he had done a seminar, I think. Like, we didn't do that backstage at the PWA or something because, like, I don't mind doing one, during other people's matches, but Fudge is very like, I want to see that match. I want to see that match. And I want to see that, and I'm just like, it'll be on Fight TV. You're not going to watch it. And then he's also very conscious of like, he doesn't want to cop any heat for not doing like ring crew and that sort of thing. And, and I know for a fact, like there's probably people who thought that I did a podcast just so I could dog ring crew. It was always just like, guys, I'm like trying to, like there's 900 trainees anyway. Like, let's just, it's fine. It's going to get done. I'm trying to do something here that's going to, be a bit more media overall that we can all kind of put out there for us. So, and hopefully the fans will like, find out our stories and invest more in us. And that's because it's all about making people care, otherwise it's just a trapeze act. So, yeah.
That was one thing that the boys at RCW were always really good about because I think they realized that we were promoting the product. Yeah. And every time we did it, we're like, oh, we're here at the RCW show, blah, 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 talking to Concrete Davidson. So they always got their name out. It's just extra publicity for them. I know that's what, I know Cree was really behind that when he finally realized what podcasts were and started listening to them. He goes, oh, this is like free advertising, isn't it? I'm like, yes, we're doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's different now. Hey, like with like, some people only have like certain amount of minutes a week for a podcast, and you really have to, speak to it to give them, for them to give you a chance. Otherwise you're not going to break their schedule. I know I only have X amount of podcasts that I'll sort of tune in and out of. It's just I think that what you were saying earlier about how many podcasts there are, it's like there's probably some really good ones that I'm like in and out of a few. It's crazy. Like Chris Jericho was one of my favorite wrestlers growing up, probably my favorite before I became a wrestler. And I would only listen to his podcast now if he has a wrestler on. And even then, if I haven't heard of him, I'm probably not going to listen to it. Like, whereas there are some other like podcasts that if stuff like Wrestle Me, I just started giving a go to, and that's a bit of fun. And they're not wrestlers. They're just, it's just two pommies that are going to review shows. And one of them is more into wrestling than the other. And it's just a good little find that I did recently. So quick little plug for them, I guess. So, yeah.
I honestly haven't listened to Talk is Jericho for years. I just fell off it.
Yeah.
And I just, I don't know why. And I just never got back into it because I started listening to, I love listening to Arn.
Yeah.
because at the moment, the way they're doing it at the moment is different to every other podcast because he's literally going through month by month of his career. So it'll be like 1986. Yeah.
Yeah. But I did do the first. Actually, no, I like him on some shows. I didn't like him on Bruce's because I thought he was like just sort of joking around too much. And what would this person sound like? And I'm not about those impressions. I'm more the Bischoff show or the Jarrett show. That I was into for a bit because I was like, I just want to hear them tell them, stories and stuff. But yeah.
Yeah. Because Jarrett gets right into it, doesn't he? When it's
Jarrett. Yeah, Jarrett's was good. I haven't listened to Jarrett's in a bit. I felt fallen off there. I wouldn't mind getting back into it. There's another one I was about to mention. I can't remember. I was going to ask you something. Do you have like guests that you'll be like, oh, that person was on a podcast, I'll listen to it? Because I have a few like if Cabana is a guest on something, I'll always listen. If Cody's a guest, I'll always listen.
If they're on a podcast that I listen to and they're on a podcast, I'll listen to it and maybe I'll pick up and start listening to that podcast after that.
Yeah. Kevin Nash is another one of my always list. I'll always listen to it. I'll go out of my way to listen to a Kevin Nash on a podcast. Those are the only three I can think of now. Cabana, Jericho, I guess. Yeah. I enjoyed the ENC one. It's good too.
I'm like that with comedians. There's certain comedians I like. Yeah. And if I see them on another podcast, I'll listen to it. And then sometimes I'll pick up that podcast. Because I used to listen to a show called The Crab Feast with Ryan Sickler and I can't remember what the other guy's name is off the top of my head. But they are both like hilarious comedians. And then one of them was on a show called Are You Garbage? And I listened to that. And now I'm just addicted to that show because it's so good. It's basically like two guys that are from Philly. They're two comedians from Philly. And they have comedians on and they ask them questions about their life growing up and they determine were you a garbage person or were you poor? It's just hilarious, the stories that some of these people come out with. But I never would have found that if Sickler hadn't have gone on that show.
Yeah, I've done that a few. I could go down, actually, in my day-to-day, like, comedian podcasts are what I listen to the most, sort of while I'm sort of, just doing my work. That's we could probably bore the listeners that are here to listen about wrestling, about comedians for a long time, but there's so many good ones. It's funny to hear all the parallels between their like grassroots levels compared to our independent wrestling and stuff. Yeah.
That's one thing I've known too, like not off topic, but off topic. Watching Heels with my wife.
Oh, right.
Like, my wife's like, that'll never happen. I said, that has happened. 100% that has happened. She's like, what?
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah.
Oh man, I haven't done any more than the first 2 episodes. Apparently, was it you that told me to stick with it? Somebody told me to stick with it because it gets better.
Stick with it.
Right.
It's good.
Okay. All right. I'll go back to it.
If you're after a good one, there's 2 boys up here in Queensland, a tag team called Bro Day. They do a podcast. It's very Hamish and Andy-ish themselves, but really good. I really do rate it. They were down here for a show and they mentioned, because they were like, oh, we used to listen to your show and we sort of started our own. Can you listen to it? Oh, yeah, I'll give it a listen. Now I'm messaging back on, this is the kind of podcast I would have loved to have done.
Yeah. Well, that was it. That was the thing, is like people have thought that like, Podclash, like I was trying to be Art of Wrestling and to a degree, but it was more like I wanted to do a podcast before the Art of Wrestling even started in like 2009, I think it started, but I wanted to do it because I was a fan of Hamish and Andy, but I never had a co-host until Fudge, said, hey, do you want to do this? And then I was like, yeah. And then, now I don't know. We haven't done one since the last lockdown. So, and then we came out of it and then we started feuding. So doesn't look like there'll be one for a little while. Yeah. Let's
talk about that, because you guys have dead set had one of the most entertaining feuds. Like, you've got no idea how hard I laughed when you did the draw for the Rumble.
Yeah. Oh, like the minute, however long, 90 seconds or whatever it was. I think it was a minute.
Yeah, but it wasn't even that. It was when you guys were in the back doing the draws for the numbers. I'm
Oh,
just like,
right.
what the fuck is what are you doing? And then when you got out there at the start and waited the time for you to come out for the second guy, I'm like, this is so good. What like spurned that idea between the two of you? Because obviously it's something that you guys have thought about. They went and pitched it just for them to have the confidence in you two to be able to pull it off.
So there's ideas like this that I've had in my, like, that I would have loved to have done for years. And I think like the one of them was just waiting the full, like the first entrant, even of a 30-guy rumble, like wait, being like, I insist on getting my 90 seconds just to waste time. But so it was a little bit of like an old idea that got, you know, thrown around. It was, we've not to peel too much back, but we're very aware of the fact that we're a different spot. And I think that the word spot in wrestling gets a bit mixed up sometimes, because like some people think, I mean, like not referring to a high spot, I mean like a spot on a show. And I think that we're aware of the fact that we're a different spot altogether, and it's more sacred, for lack of a better word, to carve out a specific or a completely unique spot rather than be slotted into, you know, something else. So it's just that we're still very in sync and like-minded in that we want to do nothing but different stuff. Otherwise, there's already a bunch of incredible athletes in PWA and fantastic wrestlers and you know, great, you know, assets in that way. But, and I'm not saying that we're not, and we can't pull it out when we need to, and we can't hang with them when we have to. But we're quite insistent on providing something different. Just because, like, I'll use this as an example. Like, so a lot of fans got mad at Santina Morella being in the Women's Rumble, and they were like, that's a spot that could have gone to Chelsea Grant or whatever other women that didn't go in the Rumble. And it's like, no, but that wasn't their spot. That was a spot for a man dressing up in bad drag, pretending to be a woman in that and getting in that Rumble, and they shouldn't have been there. So that's what that spot was. And I think probably role is a better word for it.
Yeah, role.
So
definitely.
Yeah. So it's like, that's what that role was. There wasn't anyone else that's doing a role like that. So, you know, that's just, so I think the Fudge and I have been quite, like-minded in wanting to do, you know, different stuff. And like the two-man Rumble was, that was, I don't want to peel back too much and be like, that was, you know, my idea or his idea or whatever, but it was, I think that all I'll say is that, yeah, we've always been in sync with wanting to do a different alternate sort of spot, you know, so that it's undeniable, so that you can't go like, oh, we don't have those two on the show tonight, who else can we throw in there? It's like, you can't, because we're providing something completely different. There's no other, you know, you can't put someone else in that role, you know?
Yeah. And that's the thing, like you talk about, like, it's a role, but it's also like, if you do it well, you're going to be remembered just as much as what that main event. Like, I can't off the top of my head tell you a lot of the stuff that happened on that show, but I remember that match because it was memorable. It was original, because I've never seen anything like that before. You worked the spots you've worked in that match were just brilliant for what they were. You didn't really even have to work that hard, and you got massive returns for it. For me, that's like the epitome of good pro wrestling, because it doesn't have to always be chain, big spot, big finish. If you can do something that moves the crowd, you're professional wrestling.
Yeah, and it comes back to that, you know, work smarter, not harder thing. And I think that smartness and hardness sort of go hand in hand. You know what I mean? Like, I think that if you're working hard, then you're thinking about it and you're getting it right. And it's just like I've said recently, I've started saying recently, the number one thing that cuts wrestling careers short is the wrestling. So if you can, like, work smart and do something memorable that people are gonna, you know, retain like that, then that's job well done. I think we came back to some pretty favorable responses from that match. And I think like even something like, and this it wasn't even a match, but like Ricky joining the Black Shirt Cool group was the loud. It doesn't capture it. We didn't have the crowd mic well enough. It was the loudest thing that any of us have been in a ring for. And yeah, some people have like some fans have said like it was the loudest thing that's happened in Max Watts. Like, but that wasn't a match. That was Ricky turning on Social Jordan. So it's it's about the moments, I guess. So yeah,
and that's the thing. Like you do all the stuff with the Black Shirt Cool group, which was like directly like a sort of an NWO thing where you were doing the promos that looked like the cuts and all of that, and it just straight away it like invokes that image in your head. You're like, this is so good. They're just you can tell that you guys were having fun doing it as well, and it just it was just great work.
Thanks. It's funny because I kind of, in some ways, I look back at the Black Shirt Cool group as a bit of a failure because there was a lot of people that I think it was trying to be too many things, and I think it was not trying to be too many things. I think that there was, like, to me, the actual Black Shirt Cool group was the Undisputed Era because they were the ones that made me go, oh, they're all wearing the matching black shirts, just like, and they're like the cool heels. They've got the Nexus armbands. They've even got a guy doing air guitar. Like there's so many from other groups that they're taking from, and no one seems to be kind of calling them out that it's just sort of the Black Shirt Cool group was like a backstage joke that sort of made its way into shows. But I think that there was a lot of fans still that thought that our whole gimmick was about shirts, and didn't sort of see the amount of, I think it was trying to be too many different things, and like the way that it came together was this sort of misfit group, and it was going to represent all the people that didn't fit into a group. So it was a little bit, I don't know, job squatty or whatever, but it was, I don't know, it was a lot of different things, and but I'm glad if you did get some of the references that it got over well. So.
Yeah, I loved it for the fact that like you can tell it was you thinking, well, they haven't really got anything for me at the moment, so I'm going to make my own thing, and I'm just gonna make it so that they realize, oh, he really got something here. Let's run with it. And that to me that's what I love. I love guys that will actually think of, and it's more the guys that can think of an idea that doesn't involve them all of a sudden becoming a champion. Because that's the one thing. Hey, you just did something to do it and to tell a story, which is great.
Yeah. Well, it was. It was probably good for Ricky in that sense that it sort of did. It kind of deprived the fans of their favorite version of Ricky for a while, and then he came out the other end of it, and like look at him now. But I'm not taking credit for everything that Ricky's done and where he is now. But
do it.
There was certainly a big gap between, our last, Black Shirt Ricky and him becoming PWA champion and everything. But it was definitely not to sort of branch off into too many other stories, but like, and I don't want to, I'm going to name drop here, but I was on one show with with Bob Holly, and he was very complimentary of like the Carnival Strongman stuff I was doing. And he was like, that's great. Like, send that to New York and they'll like, and I was like, well, Bob, the thing is, like, watching TV. Yeah. And he was like, well, you can always just think of something else and send him that. And I was like, yeah, it really is that simple. Like, he was like, what's the worst they can do? Say no? You think of something else again. So, that was kind of, I think there was a feeling at the time that that they wanted maybe something different in PWA, and then that's sort of what it was. But I don't know. There's been this weird character identity crisis with Concrete Davidson going for a while, but now I think this last sort of, coming back and it being 10 years from the start of the Carnival Strongman, it felt like doing that at the start of this year was the right way to go.
So you're actually going to go back to this sort of like the original iteration of Concrete now, or?
Yeah, no, I did like well, that was sort of what the idea was when I came back in, what was it, at the Factory Theatre, when Fudge and I first started feuding. That was it, sort of, when I had like a giant barbell and stuff. And
Yeah.
that was like the barbell and the bike, like these have all been pieces of a picture that's been in my head, you know, for all this time. So yeah, that was sort of what I was going for. Just because I was I said to, I think it was Bonza, something about like, I always thought that like Carnival Strongman version was, we were just hanging out watching a really old Raw from like 96 or 97, and it was in like a mall, and there was this match with like Hunter Hearst Helmsley and The Undertaker, and I think he like tombstone him on it.
Yeah, the Shotgun Saturday Night.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, I think we're watching a bit of that, and I was thinking like, you know, I always thought that like that Hunter Hearst Helmsley was like my strongman iteration, and then I was going to sort of evolve it into whatever is just me, and that one, you know, becoming, you know, the Game or whatever, the King of Kings or whatever he is now. And Bonza was like, no, the other guy. The strongman is the dead man. Black Shirt Cool Group is your American Badass. I was like, oh, all right.
Okay.
Okay. That's much better. So, yeah. Okay. So that was a kind thing to say.
Yeah. So was it when you sort of moved, and we're going back sort of thing, when you sort of moved out of doing like the full on like Carnival Strongman into more of a like a U sort of thing, was that sort of an attempt to, I don't know, move further up the card? Because I know like in UE Pro and all of that, you were positioned that way, where you were championships and all of that sort of thing.
No, so it was actually kind of in response to what was happening in WWE. It was being like, I don't want to be compared to the vaudevillains, and you know, because there's going to be some fans that don't know that I'm the original, and then don't, you know, so they're going to make that comparison and think that, you know, I'm the rip-off. Now that he's not on TV and he's not even doing it on the indies, I'm a lot more like, well, fuck it, I'm going to take it back. So are you going to bleep that, or are you going to, is this, no, yeah. All right.
That's
so
extra editing, mate. I think you know how hard this is.
Yeah. So yeah, it was more in response to what WWE was doing and them being on TV, really, because that was I remember I broke my ankle in 2015. No, sorry, 2014. I think I broke my ankle, and then I remember having like the surgery and like all like the plates and screws in it, and like sitting at home and then seeing like the vaudevillains have debuted on NXT, and I was like, could this weekend get any fucking worse? So it was when I came back, it was like, it's just slow, like moving to the trunks and that sort of thing. It was like, it was just trying to find myself and find something else. Like, it was definitely an identity crisis, and it was because a lot of fans, a lot of my friends don't even know this. Like, that whole thing caused a lot of like anxiety and like self-doubt, and really crushed the self-confidence for a little bit. And it but like, it still happened when then you mentioned like the Nui champ, like that kind of came from at a time where I thought that they were never going to look at me as being middleweight champ. I thought that the time to do that was like years earlier, when the company was in its infancy, and they didn't do it. And I think by 2017 it was 2017 when it happened, and I thought, well, it'll never happen now. And then it happened, and I was like, well, this is probably the best it's going to get. And then World Series booted back up, and they had big plans for me, and that was like just equally as big, if not bigger. So, and I think that World Series wanting me on that strongman thing at the what am I going to say? The advice or the recommendation of the Bassos at RCW, like, that's what made me go, what am I messing around in little tiny trunks for. Like, they want to see a strong man with the belt and, you know, that sort of, and the bike and everything. So I'm going to go back to that. So that sort of put an end to any plans of me just sort of trying to morph into me with the volume up, like everybody says. You know?
Yeah. Well, when you think about it, like that strongman thing got you working against guys like X-Pac and guys that you would have sat at home and watched on TV and just thought, oh, I'll probably never get to that height. Next thing you know, you're working them on national tours.
Yeah. That's the thing, is that it took me a long time to not take it back, but just be like, man, I really, you know, just when I think that people are sick of it, it doesn't mean that they really are. It's just because I've been doing it the longest. And so,
yeah.
And I think that a lot of wrestlers on an independent level think that it's time to evolve or to change stuff rather than stick with what's working, just because they're the one that's been doing it the longest. And it's
because you're living with the character
that much still. Yeah.
No, you're living with the character 24/7. They're only seeing you like once a month. Like I made this thing to guys on shows because they were talking about something and we were changing up something, and he was just like, oh, but like the people know we've been feuding for 2 months. I was like, no, they don't, because you don't do, like, you've got all this stuff in your head about backstories and all that. You've never told these people, so they don't know. You have to tell people for them to know. It's sort of that.
When we have like classes or seminars and characters and stuff, any kind of discussion about that sort of thing, I'm always big on like, guys, just don't ever be afraid to repackage completely. And that's not a knock on anyone that is doing anything, you know, that works, because what I was doing before Concrete would have worked well enough if I'd continued doing it. But there's always, everything can be better. There's always something that can be better. There's always a better character. There's always a better, way that you can do stuff. So I'm always very big on like, look, you might think that, you know, Johnny Strider is you put 8 years into that and that's what's going to, you know, make you break through. But, you know, hey, maybe if you changed your name to, you know, Hamburgers McDonald, people will be like,
you get sued.
well, maybe that was a bit too close to something. But
poor Gino knows all about that.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe not Hamburgers McDonald, but I think I'm very big on like, you know, just change your name, because I think that there's so many names that aren't. It's one of the first things that a casual fan or a non-fan will be like, what's this guy's name? I like him. And if it's good enough, they'll stick with him. But if it's a Joey Strident or something, I'm just coming up with another,
like 80s rock band names.
Yeah. Like, there's just so many of them, and I don't know. There's I'm getting totally sidetracked on my same points that I always bring up, and I think some of the students at Newey or PWA may be sick of me harping on about. I just think there's definitely room to I still think there's a lot of room for originality, and don't be afraid to repackage if need be.
No, exactly. Yeah. Pretty much this whole pandemic break has been you becoming a dad, and now becoming a dad twice. Has it sort of like changed your outlook now that we're sort of coming out of this and back into wrestling, of a way that you approach it, or is it you just want to get back and do it again?
I remember years ago thinking like the moment I started having kids was when I would probably be like, all right, let's wind the wrestling back, because, you know, you want to be able to spend time with them on the weekends. Weekends, obviously, when shows taking place. But if anything, it's just made me go, nah, they will think it's cool. Like, or maybe they won't. I don't know. Now I'm just like, nah, this makes me want to keep going. It's not like I feel like at the end of the week, now I want to spend time with them. Like, there's going to be plenty of weekends, you know, that I can pick and choose. I'm not one of the guys that wants to work every single weekend for every single company, because really there's only 2 really good companies in New South Wales. I know it's going to affect 3. I'll throw in IWA. So PWA, Newey, IWA, Outside of that, I don't really have any desire to work for any of the rest of them. And that's not a knock on them. It's just that...
personal preference.
Yeah. So, I've kind of done the whole experience. I've got to get in that ring as often as possible. It's like I just said, wrestling is going to cut their career shorter than anything else. So you just sort of space it out from here on. It's, I want to be able to do it until I'm very, very old, because it's one of those characters too that I think is only going to get better as I get older too.
And you're not taking massive bumps, so you're not putting a lot of like tax on your body, so to speak.
Well, that was always the idea. It was like to not, that was kind of part of the catalyst of the character, was to, because I just had the arm surgically repaired with like plates and screws from breaking that in like 2009. And then I came back from that and I was like, all right, like what else can I do? And so like leaning more on the character stuff and, taking it a bit easier is sort of what I wanted. And I was happy just doing the same match for a while there. And then in Newey, I remember before a show, Hoff was like, can you have like a good full-blown match? And I was like, oh, yeah, okay. And he was like, I'm not saying the rest of your matches aren't good. What I mean is like, let's see what else you can do. And I was like, okay. And then so from there
step it up, kid.
Yeah. So from there to like becoming champion, Newey was sort of the, that was a real, like I'm working matches with like Robbie and stuff like that, so rather than just having the same sort of 5-minute body slam fest. So, so now I think it's, back to your question, was like with having kids, it's not made me want to slow it down. I think because it is probably going to be a very cool thing. Like, look, they're probably going to get to an age where they don't think it's cool, but when they're little kids, they're probably going to think it's pretty cool. And I think that to, completely, shield them from the fact that I'm even part of it would be pretty cool. And then to surprise them with, your dad is on the show, will be quite a mind-blowing. If I can make that happen, they'll get away with it.
If you somehow can get away with it, just have your missus take them to a show, and then all of a sudden you walk out through the curtains.
Yeah, I've already asked some of our former co-workers now in WWE, like if my boys get into it, we need to line up something where like you really surprise the shit out of them. And we're absolutely no, it hasn't made me want to slow it down. It's funny. Yeah, completely opposite to what I thought it would be.
Well, now that everything's sort of opening up in Sydney again, you've got there's a whole lot of PWA shows happening in like a short space of time, because I just scrolled through the Facebook this morning just to check on the dates, and you've got the one at Max Watts. Then I think you've got like two. You got one in the Beer Fest show, and then
that was supposed to happen right before lockdown. There's one at the Academy. There's dates that are sort of that have been locked in, at least at Max Watts, for quite some time. So I'm looking forward to seeing that grow again, back to sort of where it was, hopefully, or better. We couldn't even really, I feel like we only maybe did one or two Max Watts, maybe just the one before we got locked back.
Factory.
Yeah, it was mostly factory and maybe just the one Max Watts before we got locked down. And then it still felt like you had to have everybody seated, and was it reduced capacity and all this. So I'm looking forward to seeing it back at its best, because when Max Watts is at its best, I don't think that anywhere in the country can quite, rival it. It's like pretty special being in there in that atmosphere. So I'm really excited for that. Newey had just locked in, like, I think maybe like quarterly shows at City Hall. Yeah, so that was supposed to be, they were supposed to have their Rumble there, and that ended up getting cancelled. And so I'm looking forward to seeing sort of how that reschedules. Oh, and they just got a new venue at Southern Cross Hall, which was looking like it was going to be mostly Southern Cross Hall with the odd City Hall thrown in throughout the calendar year. And Southern Cross Hall with all.
That was the funny thing, because I was talking to Carter Deems not long before everything sort of locked down, and he was like, "Oh no, up here in Newey, it's pretty fine. No one's wearing a mask. We're all pretty safe, and everything looks like we'll be going ahead with shows and sort of stuff." And then the next week, everything just went with like the Rumble and all of that sort of stuff. So those guys must be itching to get back into it, because I know how much they were doing.
Yeah, they were doing a lot. They just had that one Southern Cross show that I think was main evented with him and Rig versus Aussie Open. But like the way that they can, I would like compare it to RC Dub with their way of, taking a hall and bringing in the production value and really making it look like, a first class operation. So I'm excited to hopefully do some stuff at that venue because I wasn't able to get to that. But yeah, there's a fair bit that's to be excited about. I think World Series is interested in kicking back off, so hopefully I'll be back in the fold there with them. Fingers crossed. I know that's a very competitive place to bring what you have to the table, and I don't see my prior contributions continuing on in World Series, so it'd have to be something.
You can always just find a new tag team partner.
Yeah, I could. If it's in the tag team division, I know that Adrian at World Series has expressed interest in doing Davidson versus Arquette, which would be pretty
amazing.
Like that would have to be my masterpiece. If that would be like that would be. If that could materialize, that would be like the one that I can go, all right, I'm going to put everything into this. And then if it's good enough, I'll call it a day.
Yeah. And Arquette will probably be grateful he's not getting hit over the head with light tubes. So I'll do anything you want.
Yeah, well, the sort of stuff we were talking about earlier with like the role, carving out a different role on a show, and the kind of stuff that that way of thinking with the 2-man rumble, like it would be very much that turned up for a match with David Arquette. So we'll see if that materializes. I think he'd be a bit of a harder one to bring into the country than who knows.
Well, I mean, it's not a good thing, I guess, but for World Series Wrestling, there are a lot of guys at the moment that are out of contract. Yeah, they could pick from to bring down. So, like the choice that they have at the moment is probably really good for when borders open up. As bad as it is for the guys over there.
And I think there seems to be like, I know Cody at least expressed interest in doing the favor that he couldn't do when he was down, because he felt really bad that he was injured and then came anyway. So I think I don't want to speak for World Series, but I'm pretty sure Cody was still interested in paying the favour of, allowing him to come to Australia and essentially just have staring competitions all tour or whatever they were. So I think it'd be good to. It felt like there was at least maybe some sort of AEW thing, but I don't know. It was looking also like maybe ROH was a bit more involved in the last tours that were starting to get announced before that got scrapped. I'm just speculating. I don't have any information, but now ROH, what's happening there? So
yeah, it's a whole thing, really.
Yeah,
because it looks like, by all the reports, it looks like ROH are going to go to like a PWG type model when they come back in April. So no contracted guys. They just bring guys in for a set amount of time to do tapings and a pay-per-view, and then bring them in and bring the next set in.
Which is funny because like PWG essentially is like doing the old ROH model, right? Like that was
now they're starting to. If anything, because I recorded the show yesterday, because I do the show where we talk just international stuff, and I was talking about, like, if anything, I think GCW and looks like it's what ECW was back in the day. but just with like that little bit of extra death match to it. And those guys have every chance to be the third like promotion in America, just by the way, with the groundswell of support that those crowds have.
Yeah, wow. Like, isn't it crazy? Like, did you think that in 2021, 22, we're going into that, like, death matches would be back in the way that they are? Like,
no.
There's a whole company in Victoria that's that's made it their thing.
The thing is, too, like, I'm outspoken, but I'm not a fan of death matches at all. But with Deathmatch Down Under and with GCW, their undercards are so strong that I will buy one of those pay-per-views just to watch their undercards, and I'm not really fussed about what the death match is at the end of the show, because their undercard more than holds up to what the rest of what a death match puts me off, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, I think it to me, it sort of seems like what everybody's criticizing WWE for having, like a Hell in a Cell pay-per-view. Oh, right. Well, just because that's the pay-per-view, you know, it doesn't mean that every feud should have a Hell in a Cell match, or that that everyone on the show is going to have that. So it's like, all right, well, just because it's sort of the end theme or the name of the company, like, should there always be it should be this means to an end, right? So it doesn't necessarily like put me off unless it's was there like a video of a guy having his finger like bolt cut it off or something like that was.
I didn't.
Did you see that?
No.
Like that I'm like that's too much. But everything else I can pretty much stomach.
You'd want to think the payoff was something for that one. Jesus,
wouldn't you? Oh my god. I'm sure some people will be like, oh, it didn't really happen or something.
Yeah. Sorry, mate, we didn't draw too well. Like, I can't give you what I was going to give you. Here's $20.
Oh, shit. Wow.
Yeah. Anyway, mate, we've come to our time. Thank you so much for joining us. For anyone who wants to follow Conco and what you're doing, how can they do that on the socials, mate?
Oh, man, let me just I'm going to look it up right now.
It's like you've never done a podcast before. Come on.
Link. I'm just going to go. I don't know. I've got a link tree on one of them. If you just go to Dave Concrete on Instagram, Strong Concrete, just search Concrete Davidson on stuff. There's no others.
You'll find him.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on, mate. It's great catching up. Always a pleasure. And I hope that you do get back into doing your Conco and the Fudge pods again, because eventually, anyway, because I really did enjoy them.
Oh, thank you, man. Yeah, we'll see what comes of it. Now that everything's opening back up, we'll have to reassess what happens. So, yeah, fingers crossed. Thank you for having me, man. It was a good chat. Can do this.
Thanks, mate.
Cheers, man.
Too sweet, put your fangs up. Too sweet, pour another cup. Let's be busy 23.